With us on the panel today is Dr. Akiumi Adeshina, President of the African Development Bank, Honorable Malimola David Makura, the Honorable Premier of Gauteng Province, Patrick Lamini, CEO of Development Bank of Southern Africa, Professor Benedict Orama, President of the Africa Export-Import Bank, Admasu Tedese, President, Trade and Development Bank, Alan Ebobise, CEO, Africa 50, and Malam Samela Zuberu, CEO, Africa Finance Corporation, and last but not the least, Dr. Bandar Hajar, the President of Islamic Development Bank. As a matter of protocol, kindly preface your questions, first with your name and the media organization that you represent. Well, it looks like we're chomping at the bit to ask our panelists the questions that we didn't have an opportunity to earlier. So, without much further ado, we'll take our first question from the media. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, welcome. Can I see a show of hands for our first questions? But since no one likes to ask the first question, we'll go on to question number 2. Thank you very much. It looks like this is going to be a very quick one. Yes, Massimo, all the way from Rome, Italy.
Yes, it works? No? Yeah?
You're on.
Yeah, okay. Massimo Zaurini, Africa Affari Info Africa. I just would like to know, President Adesina, if with this conference you put a target, and so if there is something that you expect on 10th of November, and just this.
Okay, we'll take the next question. Kindly introduce yourself, your name, the organization you represent, and who you're addressing your question to. Looks like this gentleman in the back.
Good afternoon, MC, Honorable Makura, all protocol observed. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tinashe Mpasiri from the 1873 FM, an online radio platform which seeks to raise awareness and improve literacy on issues that matter. So my question today, when we often associate holders of capital with capitalism and those who sell their labor with exploitation, capital, unlike land and minerals, must itself be produced by human labor force before it can be a factor of production. So how then can capital be produced if an investment is made in building subsistence existence where people eat what they produce?
Third question. Right over here. We'll take 2 more questions and then we'll come to the panel.
Hello, everybody. My name is Natasha Piri from Channels TV. So throughout the conference, you've been saying that this isn't a talk shop, but how will you actually ensure that tangible agreements are actually reached, like in a pragmatic way? Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll take a last question and come to the panel. Yes, right over here.
Thank you so much. My name is Siphelele Dludla. I'm with African News Agency. My question is directed to Premier David Makura. One of the reasons why investors did not invest so much in the country before was policy uncertainty. And currently we have a situation where in Gauteng, government says that e-tolls must go. But nationally, the ruling party says that's not the policy of government. So how does government in Gauteng try to attract investors, whereas there's this policy uncertainty happening currently in this country? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll now turn to the panel to take the questions in the order that they were asked. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maxima, on the issue of the target for the forum. Let me be clear on what this forum is. This is not a show and tell forum. This forum is to create a platform that will allow the development of projects, bankable projects in Africa, that will allow prospective investors to be able to see those and reduce the search costs and transaction costs of projects. And it's a platform that will allow us collectively, as the finance institutions that are here, to intermediate between those prospective investors and the project developers. It's a very, very serious effort to change how things get done on the continent. Our goal is not a flag in front of you. So, look, no, that's not our goal. Our goal is very serious development of bankable projects that are going to be there. One of the things that my mother taught me very early is that learn to eat your food, right? Don't eat it when it's too hot. You have to make sure that you can, So what we're trying to do is we don't want hot investments. We want stable, long-term, bankable, profitable investments in Africa. That's the first thing. The second thing that we are trying to do is we're trying to change the perception of Africa. You see, all of us that are here are all African finance institutions. We are here to say that we are putting our resources collectively together with confidence in Africa's future. And we are going to deploy our resources collectively for getting that done. It's a total change of the way we do business, even as financial institutions. Right? So Africa is leading together with all its financial institutions. And that's sends a very important message to the world about how you invest in Africa. It's never happened before. The other thing I want to say is, I'm sure he can talk to you a lot about it, is the development of bankable projects. We are pulling together our resources to support project preparations that people can develop on the continent. And most importantly, is that we are working to de-risk projects. And in de-risking projects, it means that we are pulling together our risk-sharing instruments in a new way of working to say, instead of working alone, we work together so we can collectively de-risk. It's, again, a game changer in the way things get done. Having said that, we have been working on a series of projects over the last several months. So what you will be seeing throughout on this platform is right now we have about 303 deals and transactions on the Africa Investment Forum platform. That is worth $208.8 billion. In this particular conversations you will have in the next 3 days, we've curated that into 61, those that are ready for the boardroom conversations, and that is $40.4 billion. That's what we're going to be working very actively on over the next 3 days to do. But again, I do want to say that this Africa Investment Forum is a game changer, but it is not an event. It is a platform that we've set up that will continue so that we can continue to get our job done to fast-track investments for Africa. So all those things that I've mentioned to you, that's how we will collectively measure success. We are trying to change how business gets done on our continent. That's the most important thing to keep in mind. So I don't know if all the other colleagues may want to chip into that.
Sure. I'd like you, if you agree, Mr. President, to add one particular point on the question that Natasha had raised on how to ensure that tangible agreements really are reached. Again, as the President Adesina said, the Africa Investment Forum is a platform that will be available today, but in a continuous way. But it's also the platform that creates a sense of urgency to get things to the next milestone in the project development process. So you will have a number of milestones on this infrastructure project, in the case of Africa 50 and many of us, that will be achieved today in the path toward financial close. But during these 3 days, during the boardroom conversations and the signing events, we would have tangible agreements, tangible milestone reached. I take just one example, which is an iconic project that we at Africa 50 and the African Development Bank and others will join us doing, the 2 Congo Bridge project, which will be connecting DRC, and Congo-Brazzaville. This is a project that the Africa Investment Forum will help us move forward, first with the signing of a framework agreement that we'll be signing shortly. And this is the kind of things that the Africa Investment Forum is doing, helping us move project forward as quickly as possible towards financial close and towards commercial operations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Premier. I think it's quite important also for us to appreciate that the Africa Investment Forum, this is the very first time that actually you're seeing this show of force and this show of ambition by the African institution with amongst them an African politician that is very clear in terms of what needs to happen. We are saying to the investors out there that we are ready to lead this charge to prepare projects together, because some of the projects might become impossible when you're facing them all by yourself. But when you are able to collaborate and share your experiences and share your resources, because the biggest challenge to investable projects is the risk capital for projects to be prepared. I want to emphasize, now we are saying we have acknowledged that bottleneck, and this coming together is about saying we want to unlock these projects, because when these projects are unlocked, that's when then the people on the ground will begin to feel in terms of the GDP performance of the various countries on the continent. It becomes very key that you also begin to understand what binds us together as the African institutions, that we are saying we are about bending the arc of history towards shared prosperity. The continent has got serious challenges, that we are saying we want to make sure that once and for all, we work with our political principles to deal with these issues. Also, we need to acknowledge the improvement that actually we've been seeing over time in terms of the regulatory environment improvements, which actually means a lot to investors, because the investors outside, they want to see this confidence, as the president of the African Development Bank said earlier on, that we want to demonstrate to the outside world and to the private sector that we mean business. I think for the first time, once again, I'm saying when in the next African Investment Forum, you will have seen demonstrated projects and tangible projects on the ground having unfolded and having been rolled out. So really, this is something that we all ought to be quite proud, and also really saying something big is coming. We are on the cusp, almost at the inflection point, for something much more positive to happen across the continent, including in this very own country and this province, actually, with the leadership of Premier Makura.
Okay, I just want to add my 1 cent worth of the contribution to this story about is there something concrete that will come out of this? Now, we are a partner of the African Development Bank, and we have worked with the bank to look at the projects, the kind of bankable projects, the number of bankable projects that were coming to the conference. So we've been working over a long period of time in the run-up to this conference, also to know which projects the bank is prepared to underwrite. So there is no doubt, we're not fishing. The fish is there. We're not looking anymore. We know the type of projects that are going into those in the boardrooms. And we know the appetite as well. For example, if you want to know from Gauteng what in the South Africa project book, we put in the Gautrain expansion into the project book. And many of you know the Gautrain, it's been a successful, hugely successful mega public infrastructure project in our province, but we want to roll out the Gautrain to the different parts of Gauteng as the backbone of the public transport system. because rail, for a big population, 14.5 million people, rail is the most effective way of moving people across. So the expansion, the Gautrain started as an elite project, but we want to massify the Gautrain. And we know that for many Africans, African investors, and that includes the development finance institutions, but also the Asian, European, American. The Gautrain is a success story. So its expansion, it is a viable project. Its expansion is something we have put firmly on the table here. So there is no confusion. Someone is talking about policy uncertainty now. In our country, if you said this last year, I would say, yeah, you are right. But there's a different mood amongst investors in South Africa. We had a conference, and in the first investment conference hosted by our president here, the investor mood, firstly South African investors and also global investors with the leadership of President Ramaphosa, has turned around. And those of you who listen to him, you'll hear him speak. This evening he's going to speak tomorrow as well. There's no better reassuring voice about where our country is going and what issues government is dealing with than from the president, who also understands business. So if there's someone who's got any doubt, I would suggest that they are not a business person. And amongst the key issues is confronting is the areas of policy uncertainty. I'll come back to the e-tolls. It's not a policy uncertainty issue there. That's a different story there. Amongst the key issues is dealing with is what are the South African fiscal space, and I would say the African fiscal space. Fiscal as of the government revenues are shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. So an inevitable issue is that we must look for more funding, sources of funding from the private sector. And our president says that the private sector is not an enemy. We must roll out the red carpet for business to understand we need you as governments because we don't have enough money. The infrastructure backlog in Africa is huge. It runs into several billions, up to $100 billion. We will not find that money in the hands of governments to solve this problem. That's why we need the private sector. All we need is to guarantee certain things. We need the private sector, and we need our DFIs. And the multilateral finance institutions. All we need is to guarantee certain things. Firstly, we must improve the ease of doing business. Again, our president last week, when he addressed the business, this is what government can do. Government needs to make it easier for business people to invest. And the return on investment must be something we can guarantee, because there's no business person who can risk putting their money in a dispensation, in a jurisdiction, where there's no certainty that they'll get their returns. We must make it, all other red tape related stuff. And in our country, we are dealing with the visa regulations. It's one of those. In this province, we are also using, the discussion on land is important. The land in the hands of government. We want to make land available for an investor who wants to put a factory or put up in the townships, and the townships may be understood differently in a broad forum like the African context here, where the majority of our people live. We want to take businesses to invest and employ people closer to where most of our people live. We make land available. We use government land. We do as an incentive to attract investment. We do a 99-year lease. And the president will talk about the land issue possibly tomorrow. He is the most effective in South Africa to explain that investors must not be shocked when the African people say we want land back. We want land back, but we want that land to be made available to attract investment in our continent in a way that people benefit.
Thank you very much, Honorable Makura. We'll take 2 more questions moving forward, or if you want us to come back to you.
So the last area he was dealing with on the e-toll, South Africa supports the user pay principle. User pay principle for infrastructure projects, but the issue of urban tolling is a very specific, contentious issue. We have projects that businesses are willing to, or the only question they want to know is, how are you going to fund it? When you sort out the funding model, there's no confusion on policy uncertainty, but you don't want a funding model that's contentious, where you want to overburden citizens, and later people are going to revolt. That's always there everywhere. Go to Europe, go to everywhere. A funding model of an infrastructure project that's burdensome for citizens may be a problem for those investors themselves. So that's where the e-toll issue is. It's not causing policy uncertainty. I think our president will explain we are creating greater levels of uncertainty. And that's why at the South African Investment Conference last week, the highest level of a once-off by South Africans largely, statement of public confidence was the 290 billion rand. We haven't had that even in the Mandela years. At one go, South Africans putting so much money that they had locked away, saying we have confidence in this economy. So there is no policy uncertainty, sir.
Thank you very much, Honorable Makura. For reasons of time, we only can take 2 more questions. The gentleman right in the middle over here, and we'll come to Fifi in the back afterwards.
Hello, I'm Reed Kramer from All Africa, Global Media, allafrica.com. As you undertake this game-changing process to scale up investment, to what extent are you concerned about the issue of perceptions, or rather misperceptions, of Africa, and how much does that hinder your efforts to attract investment, both from outside Africa and within Africa itself?
Thank you very much, Reed. And Fifi.
Thank you, Fifi from CNBC Africa. As we talk about collaboration between the countries on the continent, President Adesina, I'd just like to know does Nigeria share this vision of collaborating to drive further investments and growth on the continent, as we're still awaiting news on them joining the free trade continental agreement area? And also, I mean, big monies are expected to plow into the projects that we're all looking for here to drive growth in the continent. I just want to know, are there mechanisms in place to ensure that, I mean, these monies are put to the use of the intended purposes, that these projects are completed on time, and that those that might get tempted to stick their hands in the cookie jar are held accountable?
Thank you very much. And over to the panel.
Thank you, and let me answer the question about on the issue of perception. What you find here is a different perception of Africa. That Africa's top financial institutions are putting our face and our resources forward collectively to move a financial market architecture that will make it easier for businesses to get done on the continent. That itself is a very different thing that you've never seen before. Secondly, is that when people think about Africa in terms of risk, I think Africa's risks are mispriced. I think a lot of it is that it's misperceptions. I think we need to let people know that Africa is not going to be known for poverty. Africa is going to be known for wealth. And our interest here is not to ask for aid. No. We're here to ask for investments to unlock Africa's own massive amount of resources that it has. So changing from a development mind lenses to an investment lenses when it comes to looking at Africa. That's very, very important to keep in mind. Africa has, huge amount of resources, minerals, oil, gas, agriculture. 65% of all the land, uncultivated arable land left in the world to feed the world, is not in Asia. It's not in Latin America. It's not in Europe. It's not in the United States. It's in Africa. And what Africa does with that agriculture is going to determine actually the future of food in the world by 2050. So what we are saying is we want to unlock that potential. Nobody eats potential. We want to unlock that potential massively for Africa. I think the other thing that we need to bear in mind is that African countries themselves have been doing tremendous amount of reforms. I think you had the Premier talk about the things that are going on here. Bear in mind that in 2016, African countries, according to the World Bank doing business, did 85 reforms. That's the largest in the world for 2 years in a row. If you take the compact with Africa countries, which of course we are going to be discussing later today, ourselves at the African Development Bank, working with the World Bank and working with the International Monetary Fund, work with compact with Africa countries, part of the G20 countries, on policy commitments, business, investment, regulatory, environment that they are going to change. They made 101 commitments. 98 of them are on track to tell you how things are changing with regard to Africa. And bear in mind, 5 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world are also in Africa. So the perception is changing. Africa doesn't want to go out with cap in hand to beg. What Africa wants to do is to show forth its own potential. And we as financial institutions are backing Africa as the investable destination so that capital can land in Africa and unlock the potential of Africa. Everybody you see around this table, we have the same mindset. Invest in Africa, invest in Africa, invest in Africa. That's what the message is, and that's the new perception, that's the new paradigm that we are pushing for the continent. And just to answer your question, I would like the president of the Afri-Exim Bank to speak, on the continental free trade area because it's more of his area. But I just want to say something about this issue. Africa's continental free trade area is going to be the largest free trade zone in the world since the WTO was created. So Africa can no longer be neglected or forgotten. No, we are going to be a huge, huge market. So everything we are talking about, from Africa 50, on investment and infrastructure, to the Trade Development Bank, with Therese on the other side, the Development Bank of South Africa, also talking with the Africa Finance Corporation, is how we get the necessary infrastructure in place for Africa to take advantage of. That's all we are doing to fast-track Africa's development. But I just want you to know that those days are gone. Africa cannot be ignored. And we're going to make sure Africa is on the front end of being an investment destination. Mr. President, I'm sure you will have better words to say on that. Yeah, President of Afri-Exim.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Let me just say one word about the issue of perception. This problem has been hanging around the neck of Africa like a millstone. Asia is not seen from the prison of Afghanistan when it was at its height of crisis. But Africa is seen from the prison of its worst economies. But this coalition, what I call the Coalition for Africa's Development, is intended to change it. I don't think that if we all pull together to do things, that there is no business person, no investor that is serious that will not come along. If we used to leverage $2 from every $1 each of us spend in our deals, this coalition should leverage multiples of that and bring more money and make everybody comfortable doing business in Africa. With regard to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, This is one of the greatest things that have happened to Africa. This will begin to change the face of Africa. The balkanization that has put Africa in the condition it has found itself, where economic and trade relations are only conducted in the north direction rather than in the east or west direction. The Continental Free Trade Area will change it. And it has received tremendous support from the countries concerned. When we were in Kigali to sign it, everybody thought that only 29 countries would sign. As the signing commenced, 44 countries signed on, and today about 49 have signed. 6 have already ratified. We need 22 ratifications for it to come into force. I believe that Cote d'Ivoire is almost en route to ratifying also. You mentioned Nigeria. I think Nigeria never said they would not be part of it. I think what the government said was that they wanted to consult with the workers, and also more broadly before they sign. And I think it's important that they do that, because the commitment governments have to make have to be accepted by everybody, so that we can have we can achieve the results that agreement is intended to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And on that note, I'd like to provide opportunities actually to Malam Zubairu, CEO of Africa Finance Corporation, to provide closing comments, and we'll come to President Tadesse to also do the same, and then we'll wrap up our conference today. Thank you very much.
Good. So, thank you. I think that one of the ways to understand how risk perception has changed for the African continent is to look at some transactions. So we are presently working on a transaction with some of the development finance institutions on this table to mobilize capital to a project. And we are mobilizing capital from European investors, from American investors, from Canadian investors. So that perception is changing. Once there's a viable project that can pay for itself, it attracts capital, especially when African institutions are putting their balance sheet on the table. We've also been able to mobilize our balance sheet together with insurance wraps to mobilize capital into the continent, essentially looking at securitization, which has been used widely across the globe, to create infrastructure, African infrastructure as an asset class. So we see this as a continuing trend, and we know that with our balance sheets, we can mobilize much more capital to support projects on the continent.
President Tadesse?
Maybe just a remark around the lady over there who said, well, what will be the tangible results of this forum, this platform? I think the good news is we have been delivering very good results now for quite some time. Not everybody in this room may know that foreign direct investment outstripped official development assistance just a few years ago. It's still very young, but clearly investment is happening in a way that we've never seen before. And I think what we're trying to do as a collective here is to send a message to the world that Africa is very serious about scaling up investment, and that seriousness is going to be demonstrated by how we collectively help facilitate that investment to come in. We will co-finance, we will join African capital with private sector capital, but global capital as well, and that will help reduce the perception that you're going into a difficult area on your own. So development finance institutions, the reason we are all DFIs here is we are known to have that quality of de-risking. When we co-finance alongside an investor, whether you're African or global, it helps to give you comfort. And as we scale up, that means we'll be able to do more of that. And it's very different from a forum or a platform that's organized by a conferencing business or an events management business. We are the sponsors. We are the people who are actually driving the conversation in this forum. And so you know we're not here for the sound bites. Yeah? We're here because we have our own business plans, we have our own performance contracts with our own boards. We need to scale up because that is the agenda of most of these banks here. Now what we're doing is we're saying it's not enough to scale up alone. And now what this does is sends a very strong message to investors that you will have strong partners as you come in and invest more in Africa.
Distinguished panelists, thank you very much for your contributions and also for your time. As we've heard throughout our session so far, it's been all about transactions, transactions, transactions. And what we do see represented on the panel here is the exponential leverage to make this possible, as well as the political and the financial will. Thank you very much for your time. Ladies and gentlemen of the press and of the media, we want to thank you for being part of the process and this journey, for shaping the narrative on development in Africa and investment on the continent. Have a wonderful afternoon. Bon appétit.